Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and have you got my new book, Ideas on a Deadline yet? How to be creative when the clock is ticking. Let me tell you, you need a copy of this for your entire team, and certainly you need it if you're a creative communicator, professional in any way. We all have to live on deadlines, and we all have to deliver. I've lived my whole life under broadcast TV deadlines, and I've just discovered they're not going to move the network slot because I can't come up with a good enough program or a good enough idea. And I've learned how to live and be friendly and embrace deadlines. It's a skill everybody needs to know. Well, today on the podcast, we have a fantastic interview. Philip Shorey, a film composer who has done a remarkable thing. He's taken the 1922 German expressionist film Nosferatu about the vampire and written a new score for it. He shows the film, projects the film in an arena, a room, wherever, theater, whatever, and has a live orchestra perform it. I mean, it's really a remarkable experience, and it's called The Curse of the Vampire. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about his whole life on the stage and what has led him up to this point in his career. I'll tell you, he chose not to be a pastor or an evangelist or a ministry leader or anything like that. He chose to be an artist. And he is a brilliant artist doing some really innovative stuff. And you're going to want to listen to today's podcast. Philip Shorey, thank you so much for being on here. Let me just throw out right off the top that I found out about you. I discovered you when Karen Covell, who founded the Hollywood Prayer Network, mentioned you in an email newsletter she did a few weeks ago. And I was really fascinated by it. I clicked on the link and checked out what you're doing. And I was so fascinated because it's so unusual and such a different approach that I just thought, I got to get this guy on my podcast. We need to talk about some of these things. So first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Man, thanks for having me.
It's really interesting. You know, I have a couple friends here in Hollywood who happen to be Christians, who happen to be filmmakers, and they have a whole theology built around horror. And so that they really believe that Christians need to be more involved because that's a powerful story. And some of their thinking is that horror is the last genre in filmmaking where you know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are, the moral universe is pretty clear. The bad guy always gets what's coming to him or her. And so it really resonated with me when I saw your project, Curse of the Vampire. So tell me a little bit about that. And I want to go back earlier, but let me tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now with Curse of the Vampire, where it came from, what you were thinking of. Tell me.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite a story. I work with a volunteer orchestra. They come together for different shows, and they're a mixed group from like professionals to people who are just getting a chance, just starting out. But we have industrial percussion, drum. It's like rock and roll, haunted house effects, full symphony, electronica. So we put together a show. We performed in Poland, Germany, Minneapolis, and we have an international connection. So there's usually people from other countries, from Poland or China or different places. And the current film that we started out with, we have two films that we work with, but the current one is Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror, one of the original vampire films from 1922. The other one we do is Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, which I didn't think was horror until I watched it. And then I realized this is real horror, about a kid that gets torn away from his mom and from his loving father. That's real horror. But Nosferatu is a vampire film. And when I first saw Nosferatu in my little vampire phase that I was going through in high school, it was just fun. It was interesting. But then I saw Nosferatu in the context of film school and film class, and it made me cry. And I was just really surprised. And I saw it in a different way. A lot of people just paint Nosferatu as just horror. It's just creepy vampire, just gothic styled. And you kind of watch all the YouTube videos with Nosferatu, and it's like horror. Okay. Just dark. Well, I just saw Ellen, the heroine, give her life for Hutter, who was caught up in greed, caught up and seduced by the vampire, and then he brought the plague and the death with him as a result of his sin. And Ellen has to give her life willingly, to sacrifice her life, to destroy the vampire. And then the light comes through. It's a very different ending than like Dracula or Bram Stoker.
Right.
But it's just like the ending is debatable. Some people say she dies like eventually, or she passes out. I think she raises from the dead. She gets up after the vampire is burned up by the sun, and she rises up. And to me, it made me cry in film school. Like I saw it in this new way, and I thought, oh, I got to do something with this someday. I don't know what. Well, a few months later, I'm in school to be a film composer. I'm in school to do that. It was my dream to move to Hollywood, to try to make it as a composer. And I go to Brazil with a little puppet show. I had developed a puppet theater, and I was working as a composer in this underground pagan punk rock theater in Minneapolis. And I got reintroduced to puppetry, which, as you alluded to, is something I grew up with. And I got reintroduced to it, and I thought, oh man, this isn't just like a Sunday school rainbow color, like fun, nice little puppetry art form. Like they were doing like really like interesting avant-garde, like intellectual puppetry. And I thought as an adult in my 20s, I thought like I can get into this. This is like unique and creative and artistic. And so I got back into marionettes using my grandpa's marionettes from the 1960s. And I developed a show called Saul's Conversion. It's just a very simple Bible story. And I felt like this is the story that would resonate with a drug lord in the favelas, or a prostitute, someone who hates Christians, who's a murderer and gets a second chance. And I brought it down to Brazil, and I just got shocked. Like I did it in a brothel 4 times. I did it in favelas, orphanages. Yeah. And it rocked my world. The things I saw God do just rocked my world. And I thought, man, a little puppet show, a little marionette suitcase in a box, toy theater, street performance, busking kind of style thing had that kind of punch to really impact people's lives and bring change and hope. And I came back from that trip to Brazil just a wreck. I'm like, I just wanted to be a composer, but really I wanted to change the world. I wanted to use my art to make a difference in the world. And I realized at that moment, for me, the best way I was probably going to make a dent in this world and bring healing and God's love to this world was probably as a street performer and a busker with a puppet theater. And so I quit my dream to be a film composer. This is like a 2005. 2006. Okay. I quit my dream to be a film composer. I started touring with this band, No Longer Music, who was quite a ways ahead of me in their calling and what they were doing. I started touring with them around the world. Started touring with my marionette theater. Fast forward 15 years, I'd seen God do crazy things like totally change, like do a show in a juvenile jail. The leadership gets a heart for these kids by receiving Christ into their hearts. Totally changes the juvenile jail. This is in Poland.
I bet.
And now it's like you walk in there and it's like a loving place, like curtains on the windows, tablecloths, like you can feel the hospitality of flowers. Yep. There's flowers everywhere. Whereas before it was just like stale and dark. And they told me your show reminded us and helped us find Christ and compassion for these kids. And so stuff like that just started happening, and a lot of other things. And then a lot of like, just, people walk away. They're like, oh, I don't like this Jesus thing. And oh, this is boring or whatever. Yep. As a street performer, people vote with their feet. Yeah. And so there's a lot of humility that you learn as a street performer. And so I'm like, busking, found my wife in Germany, but she was from here in Minnesota or Wisconsin, and got married, had a few kids, started a puppet theater in Turkey, had a huge amount of success in Istanbul with the puppet theater, wrote a couple books. And, this is what I'm doing. I'm supplementing my income as a piano teacher, but I'm totally out of the music scene, not a composer. Not just like I'm traveling a lot and just really like I'm a puppet guy, and it's not even my passion. It was just like hey, it was allowing me to see people find hope and
Yeah.
find Christ. And I was just like happy to do that because it was just beautiful to watch. So anyway, I go to a Nosferatu show and I see a band, like an 8-piece band, perform Nosferatu. And I'd done this many times, and it's quite big in Minneapolis. Like a few different ensembles perform to silent films, and it's a
Yep.
cool thing. And it's kind of, artsy and intellectual and interesting. And, that's like a thing that happens here, probably in LA as well.
Yeah.
And I used to do it with Nosferatu, but I went and just saw this band play, and it was good. It was at a theater, and I thought it was cool. The music was really, really nice, but it didn't strike me like that one time, like the vampire wasn't that creepy. He was like just kind of comically creepy, but he wasn't really that dark. And then Ellen, the hero, she was like not super strong. And I just like struggled with the interpretation of the film through the lens of the composer. And I felt something inside of me, the Holy Spirit probably just say, okay, then do something with it. And I'm like, well, what can I do? Like, I mean, I told my wife when I was dating her, someday I'm going to write music for Nosferatu, and she's like, that's so cool. But I'm like, what can I do? Like I don't know anybody. I'm not going to just write an hour and a half worth of symphonic music for nothing. And so I looked at what I had and who I knew, and I published a little comic book called The Curse of the Vampire, and it was the story of Nosferatu in the Gothic illustration style. But it highlighted these themes of like the fall and sin and like the death and the cross, the resurrection, and just like I kind of alluded. And at the end, it explained the whole story in that way, like kind of like a C.S. Lewis book, but with an explanation at the end. So I made these comics and handed them out at like Marilyn Manson shows and different places, different venues, and with friends, and just felt like this was a way I could use the story of Nosferatu to show people that God loves them. And then I pitched it to this festival, which I had a close relationship with in Poland. And I thought, if you guys, it's an art festival, and if you guys show Nosferatu, like you do show a lot of cinema, maybe people would see it in a new way with this comic book, and people would get a sense of how much God loves them, and it would be like this cool thing using vampires to present the gospel. And the organizer of this festival just thought it was cool, like really interesting, and definitely like unique for what they do. And she's like, yeah, but it needs an orchestra. It needs music. It's a silent film. If we show it, it needs music. Right. Can you write music for this film? And I was like, what? Like, well, I could, but I don't have an orchestra. And they said, well, we have an orchestra. We have a volunteer orchestra, and we feature and highlight an up and coming composer every year. You can use our orchestra. And I was in shock. And so here we go. Like, yeah, I gave up my dream to go into mission and to be a street performer on the street, to share God's hope and love and grace and redemptive plan through puppets. And then it's through mission that he gives me back my dream. And it's not through the rat race and trying to make it on my own. I mean, some people are called to that, and that's fine. But it was like completely outside of my control or my doing. It was just a gift. And I was just in shock of God's love, of how he had seen my willingness to kill my art, as I write about in my book, to surrender it, to lay it down, and for him, and how he just given it back. And so we did my first orchestra I was working with was 75 people in Polish, and it was just incredible, the fruit, the story. So we presented the film, and I developed the music with themes, with love themes and motifs, and leitmotifs and like just very metal KMFDM, like this, like the kind of crowd that would be into Nosferatu, like Danny Elfman styled or Philip Glass intellectual styled scores. That's what I'm into anyway. So I mean, I'm one of those fans. So I wrote the music feeling like I'm one of these fans, and I want to write music that these fans that love Nosferatu would enjoy. And we've done it now about, I don't know, 14 times, the performance with 14 different orchestras, and we've done it a lot. And I have a show coming up that I just booked at the Skyway Theater in Minneapolis, downtown.
Good for you.
With my current 50-piece orchestra, because the film turns 100 years old this year.
Oh, that's right. It does. Yeah. I mean, he shot in 21, released it in 22. I remember F.W. Murnau, the director, it was German Expressionism. I mean, it was the peak of German Expressionism at the time. And it was an epic film. And you're right. It was silent. My wife, Kathleen, a number of years ago, we went to the Anson Ford Theater in Hollywood and saw the silent version of Ben-Hur with a full LA Philharmonic in front of it. Wow. And man, that was an amazing experience seeing that. Yeah. So I totally get your fascination. I love that concept. And by the way, for the record, I filmed in the favelas outside of Rio in Brazil. And you're right. That's a pretty scary place. Pretty scary place. I remember filming and seeing this 12-year-old kid, 10 or 12-year-old kid standing off to the side with a machine gun, and he's got this glassy eye, hopped up on drugs look about him. And I'm thinking, you just don't want to set this kid off. It's a really rough place. And so kudos for you having the courage to take that, the ministry to places like that, because I think that's exactly what we need to be doing. But that's fascinating. So how have people received it? I mean, this is an interesting, and the great thing about this, and I don't want to go on, I'll let you talk, but the great thing about this is it's something that you could invite a non-believing friend to, and they'd be perfectly at home there. They'd feel very comfortable in that kind of environment. So what's the response been?
And the responses have been incredible. A wide gamut, of course.
Okay.
You have people who they love the film, they love the music, but they're not so keen on what inspired the film for me, which is Jesus. Right. What inspired the music,
Right.
And then you have some people who are, and that's actually I've found to be a minority, like people who are just really oppose what I believe. And then you have people who they tear up a lot, and come to me and tell me that you have some people who are, I've seen wrestling with drugs and wanting to release it after the show. I had one gal, she was very suicidal. She came to our show and she felt like killing herself most of the film because it's so dark. And she already came in with that plan. But during the resurrection, she felt released from it. And she came up to me. She was crying. She gave her life to Jesus, and she was baptized in the river the next day. And so we've seen a lot of people like come into a relationship with Jesus. I see myself as still the guy in the punk rock theater. I'm still the composer. Like they were preaching about, women's rights and anti-war and, a lot of drugs, beer. They're preaching about like all this Eastern religious kind of stuff. There's lots of evangelism going on in the underground punk rock scene. And I'm one of those guys. So I felt like, well, I'm going to share what I believe too,
Yeah. Good for you.
And I'm just going to share what inspired the music. Cause clearly this is a miracle. Like I'm a no-name composer. Those kinds of people, even good composers, don't always hear their own music with full orchestra. I mean, what a privilege. And so here I am. I have multiple orchestras and I put them together and people perform my music with me, and I'm a nobody. I mean, this is clearly a miracle. This is like a God-given gift. And so I'd be a sellout if I didn't share what inspired it, like why I do it and where it all came from. It was like, it would just be the most selfish sellout thing that I could do. So I definitely need to I use tact and I I have to be sensitive and to the environment that I'm in, and definitely err more on the side of like relationship, but also being bold and not being afraid of what people might say. I mean, I've even had non-believers come up to me and say, wow, we can't believe you went there. Most people would not do that out of fear of being canceled, but you spoke up anyway.
Wow.
And that's a guy who's a non-believer who respects me as a Christian. And you don't see that very often, people respecting Christians right now.
Well, I've for years I've said that if you film the Bible accurately, it would probably be an X-rated movie. I mean, there's incredible violence, throughout the Bible. There's incredible scenes that most Christians have this idea that every Christian movie has to end with have a happy ending. It's got to be G-rated. And I think we've just restricted our artists so much by having this family, friendly approach to everything, that there's some really difficult stories that need to be told. And that's one of the things that really attracted me to what you're doing. You're not afraid to try to tell those kinds of stories that are quite dark, if you will. And so I think that's, we need, I think there's a lot of people listening to this conversation that are probably encouraged that they can go out and do that, because I think it's so important to do.
Oh man, absolutely. You can't have light without dark. You can't have the resurrection without the cross.
Yeah.
You can't, you got to have the dark night of the soul to find hope.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Now you call yourself an evangelistic artist. Tell me a little bit about what that means.
Oh man. Well, so Christ creative. Whatever you want to call it. I mean, again, I have to know who I'm talking to, because like in the church world, I'm an evangelistic artist, but to a non-believer, non-church person, I have to remind them, well, everybody's an evangelist the moment they speak what they believe.
Yes.
So, don't put me in a box with like a certain televangelist kind of reputation with all the baggage that comes with that. I'm just trying to be obedient and use my gifts and surrender them back to the Creator. And it is just a privilege for me to know that there is a Creator who's an artist, created all of this. And man, I mean, I get to tap into his vision for healing a broken world through the arts. And he's a creative artist too. So he created us in his image. We are artists and we get to create. But I mean, it's an amazing privilege, but it's also a very dangerous privilege. It's one of those places where normal people don't belong. Like, not that I'm not normal, but I mean like the stage. Like the stage is just a dangerous place. When you are elevated and people are looking up to you, it's just something that you have to like guard yourself and remember, like, it doesn't matter what they say, good or bad. I'm getting my marching orders from the Creator who loves me, even if I fail. Yeah. And it is a restoring, and he's not into it just for the momentary spotlight. He's not into it just like a fleeting fan, where as soon as you don't give them what they want, they hate you. They're like vampires. True. And so I'm just like, man, it's so much more amazing to do this for an audience of one than just try to please the masses. And even for an audience of one, like, we might do a show and see like, hundreds of people just be like, okay, we loved the movie, but not the message. But there was that one person that's just like, their life has changed.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
Or like the one kid I've had multiple kids, like 9-year-old kids, like come up to me and just like be in shock and awe, want to shake my hand. And like you can tell, like there was something that happened, like their relationship with God. Like I asked them, like, how's your walk with God? And they're like, it's good, and like, but like their life was just impacted at a very amazing age. And and I get to be a part of that story.
Very cool.
That's way better for me than, making it in Hollywood or selling a ton of albums,
Well, talking about kids, let's go back in your life story. You started out, you came from a family of people that were on the stage, that were out there doing meetings and stuff. Tell me a little bit about where you came out of.
Yeah, well, I'm the fourth generation puppetry evangelist, you might say. Uh, so
Wow.
my great grandfather started this whole thing coming over. He missed the Titanic, and he was an immigrant and to Canada, and they struggled hard like any other immigrant. And
Now, hold it.
eventually,
Let me go. Wait a minute. Let me interrupt you. What made him miss the Titanic?
his mother saw the controversial sign that some people say didn't exist, that said even God can't sink this ship.
Oh,
And she got spooked. And they were nominal Lutherans from Denmark. And she thought, we're not taking this ship. We're waiting for the next one.
wow. That's amazing.
So with tickets in hand, they went back to the ticket office to exchange their tickets.
Wow.
Now, the funny thing is, here's the kicker. I'll give you the punch of the story from my book, Travelogues of a Family Sideshow. My wife's family also missed the Titanic. And
You're kidding.
He was late from a bar. So they claim that he never drank. But anyway, he was supposed to work the ship, and it was late. So probably both in the same ticket office, getting new tickets to go to North America.
Wow.
And then 100 years later, their descendants meet in Germany, which is a really
very cool story.
Cool story.
So your great grandfather was a puppeteer himself?
Yeah, he got into he found the Lord through the Salvation Army. There's the Salvation Army that initially helped get them established on their feet, and then he walked with them to a meeting following their marching band in Canada, and gave his life to Christ. Really became radical. Did whatever he could. Eventually, during the marionette era of the 1940s, when marionettes were more common and more more mainstream, he got into marionettes because that was the art form of that day. And he started using puppetry to share the gospel. And this was actually in Canada, whereas at the exact same time in California, the Fellowship of Christian Magicians was forming with magic and puppetry. But he there was no connection. He was doing it in Canada. He got introduced to magic by a Martin Clausen, a guy who fell in love with his sister, paid his own way to come across North America from Denmark, and he had gotten rescued as a street kid in Denmark from my grandpa's mom. So he was an alcoholic street kid, probably did magic on the side, like sleight of hand, something to get his way on the streets. And then he gets set free from that kind of addiction, comes to North America, teaches my grandpa magic. And
wow.
Yeah, so then he taught my grandpa Ed, how to do different things with music and performance. And my grandpa came to Christ, and during the World War II era, where I think it was World War II, but yeah, it was the time when people were really desperate and praying a lot, like we should be right now, right?
Yes.
Because of the fear of war and the depression and everything.
True.
And so, yeah, so it's kind of continued to my time. And I grew up in a trailer in a camper during the 1980s. And I saw people coming to the altars and praying with them and using puppetry, and it was a part of my parents' shows. Yeah. So,
we'll put all of this in the show notes because I want people to go check it out. It really tells that story is suitcasesideshow.org. And you mentioned your book, Travelogues of a Family Sideshow. It's fascinating, and I encourage people to go check that out because it's really, really significant. And of course, thecurseofthevampire.com is the place to go and find out about what you're doing now. But I'm so impressed that you're someone who never went into the ministry in the traditional ways people always think of being a pastor, being an evangelist, even a missionary. But in many ways, you are a missionary. You're just going into a different world. And so I just think there's a space out there for Christian artists that we need to grow. You mentioned it earlier. It's interesting that God chose to introduce himself to us in the first verse of the Bible as a creator, and we're made in his image. And I think we need to raise the bar when it comes to creative expressions of our faith out there. So I love what you're doing, and I'm just so impressed. Let me ask you this. What would you say to somebody who is has always thought about this or thought kind of in this vein. And I just heard this guy, Philip Shorey, who's pulling this stuff off. What would you say to encourage people out there that have, just take that step? What would you encourage them to do? Give me a word for those people who might be listening right now.
One, I would say the church is for you, not against you. Because I know a lot of creative people struggle with that because if you don't play a guitar or a certain instrument or sing or have a pretty voice, then it's, where do you fit? What if you're a sword swallower?
Yes.
Like, where do you fit in the church? Right.
Uh-huh.
I would say the church is for you, not against you. Hang on to that. I would say, don't just wait for something big. Start where you are. God uses little things to do a lot. And so a lot of people want to just like, hey, I've got this dream. I want to do this film. It's like, well, start small. Start with what you have. Start where you are. God can do a lot with a little right there. He wants you to be faithful with little before he can trust you with much. I would say get connected. Being an artist and a messenger of the gospel is super difficult because you're running in crowds that are very cynical and very oppose Christ. So you need camaraderie, you need connection, you need accountability. And if you don't, you'll slip because the world is very evangelistic the other direction.
Yeah.
It'll get discouraging. And so actually I work with an organization with Steiger, and I have a lot of friends from around the world, like in Brazil and Poland and a lot of countries that are doing what I'm doing their own way, whether it be hip hop or graphic design or something else or electronica. And,
what's the organization?
It's called Steiger.
What's it stand for?
It's a Dutch word. It started in Amsterdam when the founder was working with the punks in Amsterdam in the 1980s. So it means pier. So like a boat pier.
Interesting.
Anyway, that just to say that like my greatest asset apart from the Holy Spirit is probably like the fellowship I have with other artists who are very, very like in line with doing what we do and like encouraging each other. And when one of us gets canceled or blacklisted or something like that happens, like we're there for each other. Right. We know how to, we share wisdom and guidance with each other. So it's really important to not be a loner, and to not be a loner. I mean, that's what you need the church for. To not be a loner, not to be a Rambo Christian, the classic, American James Bond, Rambo, Rocky, I can do it on my own, that kind of thing. It just doesn't work in Christianity at all.
So true.
So you got to get connected. You've got to find community and some people that believe in what you're doing, and start small and be okay with failing and trying again. And don't get hung up on just like what you like to do, expand, go to shows that are different than what you like, go to places with people that are outside your bubble, experience other things that get your mind thinking in new directions. So what you produce doesn't just feel inbred or like from a bubble, but it's got like diverse opinions and ideas attached to it. I think that was me when I was working in like the pagan punk rock theater. I got exposed to a lot of unique stuff and they knew I was a Christian, but they liked my dark, creepy music that I had a tendency to write. So they loved that I was there to be with them. So find a community and outlets like that just really expand your creativity and challenge you. But be aware, they will pull you in if you're not connected to a church or a fellowship or something.
I've often told young creatives that, particularly those that talk to me about coming to Hollywood, don't lead with your faith, lead with your talent. I tell people all the time, if you're an extraordinary composer, director, actor, writer, whatever, that will get their attention. If you come here to Hollywood and say, I'm here because God called me to change the industry, they'll laugh you right off the lot. They're not even going to consider it. But if you're brilliant at what you do, they'll listen to whatever you have to say. So I just think that's what you said is important. And I do believe, you mentioned sword swallowers. I do think whatever your artistic niche may be, there's a place for you. I spoke at a church conference in Milan, Italy, a couple years ago. Sabaoth Church, great church. And they have an epic street team, just an epic street theater team. And they have a fire breather on their team. And man, you talk about getting people's attention. He can get people's attention. And so they have some remarkable successes out there. So I just think that whatever people do, God can use that in a very powerful and a positive way. So well, let me ask you this. If there's one last thing you'd like to leave people with, what do you think it would be?
There is nothing that I can do with this orchestra that is because of me. It is hundreds of miracles. I can't even go into them all. I shouldn't. Some of them are very fresh, and I'll probably start crying. It's all because of Jesus. And so I think if we get that, if we get the fact that, like, if you're not seeing a breakthrough, then maybe you just need to start fasting and praying and getting more desperate. Maybe we've become a little too comfortable in our faith. And if we really want to see that breakthrough, whether it's just because we feel bored or complacent or stuck, or just like, what happened? How did I get here? I think we've just gotten too comfortable as a church, as followers of Christ. We go to a comfortable church and we sing songs that make us feel good. But I mean, anytime you saw in the Bible something radical happened, it was usually because of somebody or something that they took a step of faith that was very uncomfortable. Joshua walking into the Jordan before it parts.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Oh boy. What if this miracle doesn't happen? What does that mean about me? Will people still follow me? What happens to my ministry? You know what I mean? Like, that's an uncomfortable place to be. And so I think just embrace that awkwardness and just be willing to get dirty and uncomfortable and lay your reputation on the line and trust Jesus, because he loves you more than anything and he won't let you down.
Awesome. Well, hey, Philip Shorey, thank you so much for doing this. Like I said, I'll have all your links and information in the show notes. People can go there and check you out. And I would encourage people to do it. And you got shows scheduled. You're continuing to do concerts out there, whether it's Nosferatu or your next film or whatever it may be. I encourage people to check you out. And if Philip ever comes to your part of the world, go see the show. It's really quite remarkable, and go check out the websites, because they're fascinating. Very, very well done. Thank you so much for being a part of this and speaking into this, because I think it's unusual, it's rare, and it's so very, very important. Thank you so much. Thank you, Philip. That's a fantastic interview. I love talking to that guy. I mean, he's doing some really remarkable things, and I so admire Christian artists, people who are artists who happen to be Christians. And I don't buy into the Christian artist thing so much, but I love the idea of an artist who happens to be a Christian and who shares their faith in a unique and creative way that only an artist can do. I think we need more people like Philip in the world today. So I encourage you to go check him out and watch what he does. Also, to help all you artists deliver on time, remember my book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking. I'd encourage you to check it out. Check out my blog at philcooke.com. Remember, Cooke, philcooke.com. That's kind of the hub of everything we do here. And I'd encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. I do a weekly email newsletter that will keep you up to date on what I'm writing, what I'm talking about, the podcast information. It's just a really great source. It's absolutely free. Go to philcooke.com. You can sign up for it there. Thanks again. Share this podcast. If you know a young artist, someone who needs to be encouraged, someone who needs to see what's happening out there in the world and really the more innovative stuff people are doing, I'd encourage you to go check it out. And I think it's so important to get this information to different people. Rate us. That always makes a big deal. Comment. Let me know your thoughts. And I'll see you on the next episode.